So in that case, we break it down to a schematic, a simple schematic of how it works. Why? Because in order to create any form of control, you must systemize. Systemize means reliability. Let's quickly talk about it. We know how to place the diffuse. We expose it through the diffuse value by the incident reading of the main source of illumination, setting the diffuse. Then we control the specular and the shadow. But there's more than just the brightness. There's the edge transfer. Oh, there's all sorts of things. What are the primary controls? The primary controls is the height and the width and the distance of the source of illumination. The quality of light is controlled by the size relative to the distance, the height, the width, and the distance of that source of illumination to the primary subject. Any alterations of any of those three distances will change the quality of light, which you will call beautiful or soft or hard light. What do you want it to look like? It's none of my business. Okay, I'm not here to say what it should look like. I'm just here to say those are the laws, those are the rules, this is what you work with. Okay? And you can do anything you want with them. Believe me, I ask you to do anything you want with them. Because that's what your job is innovation, of doing something we haven't done. Okay? One of Aristotle's favorite sayings was that an answer is often ignorance mistaken for knowledge. Okay? That we think we're always right, but we're wrong. Next year we'll know we're wrong. But our job is to constantly keep trying to figure it out. That's why it's called a practice. We practice photography. We don't perfect it. So in that case, let's break it into it. Edge transfer. We have a highlight, we have a shadow, do we not? We have a highlight, we have a shadow. Is that a soft light or a hard light? Hard light. Is it a big source or a small source? Could be a big source. Farther away. Okay. Now what makes you say that it's a small source or it's a hard light? What is it about that lighting? Shadow. What about the shadow? The edge of the shadow, not the density, because there's a density in the edge, is it not? So if we wish to make this edge transfer over a larger area, you can either increase the size of the source or move it closer. And does the source get bigger as you bring it closer? At what rate does it get bigger? By the law of the inverse, by the square of the distance. If you go from 4 feet to 2 feet, the source gets twice as big vertically, twice as big horizontally. It becomes 4 times larger by diminishing the distance in half. Okay, we can call that pretty light. We can call that soft light. I'm not going to call it anything. I'm just going to say a soft edge transfer. Which one do you like? I don't know. I don't know. Beauty's in the eye of the checkbook holder. Okay, it's none of my business. I'm just talking about the facts, just the facts. Just the facts. I can talk about how it can be done because that's what I'm asked to do. Every day I'm asked to do something different. I've got to go back into my memory banks about how this whole cause and effect is. Not relying on a style. You can't say, sorry, I can't do that. That's not my style. I don't know how to do that. That's like going down a hill on a toboggan every day. We don't know how we got down there. We just sit on the same sled and it takes you to the same place. But if you kind of understand the foundation, then whatever you want to do, you can do. And you got freedom with wings. You're not locked into a look. Okay, a look. Because looks are often based by ignorance, not by desire. Okay, well then we have another thing called contrast. Contrast is the relative brightness between the shadow and the diffused. Not the highlight, because the highlight's relative to the diffuse. See, everything's relative to the diffuse. Everything's relative to the diffuse. Right now? Right now. Right now? Contrast. Contrast. Contrast in this case right here, okay, ratio. Okay, if I change the ratio, which one am I to change? Shadow, relative to the diffuse, correct? Is it 1 to 4, 1 to 8, 1 to 16? I wouldn't say 4 to 1. I wouldn't say 8 to 1. I wouldn't say 2 to 1, because if I say 2 to 1, I'm referring to something more than the constant, and the constant is diffused. 2 to 1, 8 to 1. If I speak of 8 to 1, I'm speaking about what contrast range? The diffuse to the specular, something above. 8 to 1, 4 to 1, 6 to 1. But if I speak of 1 to 4, 1 to 8, I'm speaking of a fraction. What could be a fraction of the diffused? The shadow. The shadow is a fraction of. When is it right? When they buy it. When they buy it, that's when it's right. Or when it's produced within the range that has been desired to do, when it's produced within the range of the printing presses, if they desire to have detail. There are laws that you will produce it for. Contrast, range. What should it be? I'm not here to say. But I say that It is the range of control. You control the brightness of the shadow to the diffused, the edge transfer to the diffused. And then you have an entire other range that we'll get into. We've talked about the diffused or the shadow, the diffused or the shadow. But then they're going to deal with in a whole different range, predominantly in commercial photography, advertising, product photography. It is the diffused to the specular, okay? When you have no information to shadow, it is reliant upon it, as you can see here. But before we start breaking this one into its components and talk about the relative brightness of the diffuse to the specular and how this image is predominantly diffuse and specular range, we do now have to take a true break, okay, and get back on this in about 10 minutes, okay? And then we'll get into this section.